All right. So this is week 2 of the Image of Holy, or the Holy Heart of Jesus, whatever you want to call class. As Danny was saying, we're going to just look at episodes in Jesus's life and see what they tell us about holy. Last week he told you that I like to do all the negative, weird stuff, and he's right. I do. I don't know. I feel like worship is for the here's what I already know and it's awesome and I like it. Okay, great. And study is for the, but I don't know this, or this feels weird, or I don't like it, or the finding more peace, because that's where peace is hiding in our questions. So we have to poke at them. And when I thought, yeah, Jesus can teach us about holy, I want to know about the weird stuff, and I want to know if he throws a fit at this fig tree. And are we allowed to throw fits? And what does it mean? And did he murder the tree? What's the geez. What are we I know, what are we learning? I'm gonna steal this because I didn't have enough. Okay. You can have it back in a minute. Okay. So we're gonna look at the fig tree situation and figure out what is going on. And I did not pick this out having read it, right? Me and Danny are brainstorming ideas, and I just thought, man, you know what? I don't really get, never really looked at too much. I've heard a passing comment here or there that maybe was right, maybe was wrong. I've heard argument. What's the deal with this fig tree? I would like to know why that's in there. What does that teach us about holy? And then I looked at it, and guys, I'm accidentally reteaching James because you'll notice. Okay, so let me read to you. So, fig tree story appears in Matthew 21 or Mark 11. I want to talk about Mark 11 because Mark 11, the timeline helps me understand better. In Matthew, it says triumphal entry straight to the temple, cleared it out, on his way out of town. The entire fig tree episode happens in one shot. Bam. In Mark, though, triumphal entry, goes to the temple area, has a look-see-do, sees what's going on. Not enough time to do anything, though, because it's evening. So with what he saw and the triumphal entry on his mind, he heads out of town or to wherever they stay at night. Goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, goes back to the temple to do what he didn't have time to do last night. On the way there, sees the tree, says, I'm going to go see if it's got something on it to eat. Goes over there, nothing on it to eat, whispers his little cursey do. And then they go to the temple, cleanses the temple. And then on their way back out of town, the disciples are like, whoa, hey, that with the tree and the whoa. And then they have a little conversation about it. Okay. So it's pretty different. Matthew, you have temple, then fig tree. Mark, you have sees the temple, out of town. It kind of goes back and forth, and it feels more like a story. And I think it helps me to understand Jesus's thought process a little bit. But anyway, we're sticking in Mark 11, so you can study the Matthew one on your own sometime. But this is from Mark 11. But at the end of the fig tree episode, when Jesus is teaching his little teaching sentences about it, it sounds so much like James. The blue line on there, which is, it says, Jesus says, have faith in God. Truly, I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, the part I made blue, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Doesn't that sound a whole lot like James 5 or James 1 verse 6? Remember, this was our first case study of asking and receiving. It says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That's the same thing. That's the same thing. Okay. But also there's weird though, because the very next sentence Jesus says in the fig tree thing, the green one, is, therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. That sounds a lot like James chapter 5, when it says, and the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise them up. Both of those two send off my little alarms like, wait, hold on. I've asked for prayer and not got it. Or I've asked for something not healing and it didn't just happen. So does that mean I was wrong? What does that mean? What does that mean? So there's a little bit of that going on in this too. So I think we're going to overlap James a decent amount. Also, helpful information in biblical literature. An abundant vine or tree or plant or land is associated with the kingdom of God, and barrenness, not producing, is associated with the sin and the world's kingdom. There's that. Also, in biblical literature, a fig tree represents Israel. Okay, gotta know those two things, and we got to know Isaiah 56. He's going to quote Isaiah 56, and I think it's going to help us understand. So if you will indulge me, I'm going to read Isaiah 56, 1-8. This is what the Lord says: maintain justice and do what is right, for my salvation is close at hand, and my righteousness will soon be revealed. Blessed is the one who does this, the person who holds it fast, who keeps the Sabbath without desecrating it, and keeps their hands from doing any evil. Let no foreigner who is bound to the Lord say, the Lord will surely exclude me from his people. And let no eunuch complain, I am only a dry tree. For this is what the Lord says: to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbath, who choose what pleases me and hold fast to my covenant, to them I will give within my temple and its walls a memorial and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will endure forever. And foreigners who bind themselves to the Lord to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord and to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath without desecrating it and who hold fast to my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain and give them joy in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. The sovereign Lord declares he will gather the exiles of Israel. I will gather still others to them besides those already gathered. So that seems to be a pretty clear message that when a Gentile or a foreigner, really anybody, goes to the temple to seek the Lord, what should they find? The Lord. And anyone who's there saying, I work here at the temple, isn't there to be like, and I'm going to decide if you can get in or not. They're pretty much a flight attendant. Like, not my business if you have a ticket, but you're here. This is where your seat is. Like, that's what you should find, right? That's what it says. You want to keep my Sabbath? You think, hey, God's onto something here. I'm going to go to the temple. You need to be met with receiving the Lord. He wants to receive you there. That's okay. So the fig tree story is, like I say in Mark, sandwiched by the cleansing of the temple story. And all the commentators in my study Bible tells me that's because they're linked. One's a commentary on the other. It's slightly less obvious in Matthew because it doesn't have that like back and forth from one to the other all the way through. It just goes, here's one, here's the other, but it still says they're linked. And just refresher course, did you know there's two temple cleansings? I'm sure I knew at one point because I took a class in college called Life of Christ, and I'm sure they told me, but I did not recall. And then the one that I recalled, the one with the whips and that's the one in John 2. You find that in John chapter 2. It happens right after his public ministry begins. So it goes wedding at Cana, first episode in the temple. It's a little bit more aggressive. He does use whips and things. And that's the one where so the whips and the I will rebuild the temple in 3 days, famous cleansing temple. That's the first one. That's John 2. That's not what we talking about. Except for that is kind of the same thing, and he did it twice, so they probably inform each other, so probably don't just forget it happened. But that's not the one we're talking about today. Today, this is what we're talking about. Mark 11. Jesus, Hosanna in the highest, haha, fig leaves, or not fig leaves, palm leaves, he walked in. And then it says, Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. And when he reached it, he found nothing but leaves because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard him say it. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written that my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. And when evening came, Jesus and his disciples went out of the city. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots, and Peter remembered and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." "Have faith in God," Jesus answered. "Truly, I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourselves into the sea,' and does not doubt in their hearts, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may also forgive you." Okay, that's what happened. What does it mean? I'm emotionally invested to this tree. I don't know why. And let me just tell you, Jesus and these 12 dudes don't seem to be emotionally invested in the tree. I don't think that's the point of the story. I don't think caring about the tree is the right question to ask, because you got to ask the right questions of the stories, right? And I don't, but the tree, I don't think that's, I think I'm just gonna have to emotionally just deal. I'm just gonna have to get over it. It's not about that. But the tree is an integral part of the story, because if it's just doing exactly what it's meant to do, it is behaving right for the season. Why? And he knows it's not the time for figs. It says it's not the time for the figs, not the time for figs. And if he knows, he's not an idiot. They're pretty into the land. They know when things are in season. That's when they eat them, right? I don't know when things are in season. They probably did. Just everybody, right? So he probably knew walking along. Okay, there's a fig tree. It shouldn't have figs. I'm gonna go see if it has figs. It doesn't have figs. Die. What? Is that what happened? It seems like he had a bad day, but I think there's a stream of consciousness that goes across the whole thing. And here's what I think it is. What say you? So he comes in, he does what, I mean, he's done some pretty Messiah-y, I'm the Messiah things before this. I mean, Lazarus was before this. There are a few things that he's done that are like, oh, from this point on, they wanted to kill him because he made too great a claims. Like, that's happened. But maybe the triumphal entry is like the Messiah-iest thing he's done so far. He's like, he claimed it. I'm the Messiah. I'm coming in. And he starts his ministry. He goes actively to the city to save it. He knows what he's doing. And to be greeted as a king in that way, knowing what you're doing, like this is on his mind. The plot. That's what he's thinking. It's kind of like, I was talking to Karen Strong about this, and she pointed out at the first temple cleansing in John 2, there's also a stream of consciousness like, this is disconnected unless you know what Jesus is thinking. At the wedding in Cana, his mama says, "Hey, they need wine." And he goes, "It's not my time yet." Like that's a weird answer. Non sequitur. What do you mean not? Of course, what? Unless he's thinking about his wedding reception, then it is his time. So there's kind of like a, what are you thinking? What are you thinking going on? And I think that's happening here. So he knows the cross is coming and he knows why he's doing it. And he's got that on his brain as he comes into the city. He goes to the temple and he looks around and he sees what's going on. And it says, the notes in the study Bible says that where they set up this market business was in the court of the Gentiles. So the place where the people God is calling to him are supposed to come and find him is now a busy, bustling marketplace. Now, were they gouging? Were they overselling? Yeah, probably. That seems to be historically accurate. Fine. And that's never good. But it seems like that, like he was already upset by the fact that the market was just in there. Like, this is not what this room is for. It was set apart, holy, for a specific purpose. And we defiled it, or we'll just say we defiled it with this market. And that's not good. So he sees this. He sees the church the temple saying something. He put on it something that it was supposed to say. He says, to the nations, this is where you will find me. This is my house. This is where my truth is spread. This is where you find who I am. You want to find me? You come here, you find me. It says something, but then its actions didn't match. It said to the world, come find the Lord here. And then you got there and you found a marketplace. You found a way to buy your own salvation. You found what the world was already offering you. The temple's words and its actions didn't line out. Okay. So he sees that. He goes away, spends the night. In the morning, walking back into town, he sees a tree. It says it's in leaf. And I did some Googling. And Google says that a fig tree gets its figs shortly after the leaves. Most of them. Some of them, the leaves are old when they get their figs. Okay, fine. Leaves and figs, though. It's not going to fall off first. They're going to be leaves and figs on a fig tree at the same time. That's true. And then it also says that he sees a tree in leaf. And that's notable because it's probably the only fig tree that happens to be in leaf at the time, because it's not the time for fig trees to have leaves at all. None of them should. So essentially, if you'll allow me, this might be a stretch. He's walking along and he sees a tree that's telling him it has fruit on it. It says, fruit, leaves, check out my leaves. That means I have fruit. I have fruit. I have fruit. And he goes, I'm hungry. This tree says it has fruit. Let me go get some. And then, very exactly like the temple that was saying something, that was saying it had something prepared, ready for you, he went to get it, and it wasn't there. The tree's advertising and its actions. Will you get a mic? Where does she go? Here she cometh. 1 minute. But anyway, the tree's words, its advertising, and its actions didn't match up. In the very same way, the temple's words and actions didn't match up. And that's the stream of consciousness he had. He saw the temple last night. He knew this was happening. He walks out on the way to deal with it. I would really like a fig. The tree says it has a fig. It lied. Do you have the mic? You have the mic? Oh, what?
I have a question.
Okay.
What do you think, who the people were in that temple doing the selling? Was it the Gentiles or was it the Jews?
I assume it had to be the Jews. They were there to provide a service. So it was, you had to come with a sacrifice. There were different sacrifices for different things. When you had a baby to dedicate, or when blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So if you had a family that had a farm or agri, you could bring your own. But if you didn't, you'd have to purchase one, or if you came from somewhere else and you couldn't bring them or whatever. So there needed to be a system. I don't think God's mad that there needed to be a system for people to bring with them to the temple what they were going to use at the temple. I think that's fine. He just didn't like that it took over the space that was dedicated for something else, that it had been set apart for something. So I think that just needed to be outside. And if you're going to do it, it does need to be fair. Yes, true. Also, though, we don't need to do it right here. Like, there's a reason we don't have a kitchen in here. This is not the space for this. We worship in here. We study the Lord in here. And if I were to just like bring in a bunch of Girl Scouts and some vendors and be like, this is fine, right? You guys be like, no, this is not fine. This is not what we do here. You can have a fundraiser somewhere else on another time, but not here, not now. So I think that's what's going on. I think Jesus sees the temple saying he gets to decide what it says. It's his house. So he said, the temple says this. It says foreigners come here, find this. And it didn't line up its actions. And that's what the tree did. It was unseasonably advertising with its leaves. It said, I have fruit. He went, great, I'm going to get some. He went, there wasn't any there. Then he utters the curse. Ugh. And there's some of the commentaries are like, well, it's not a curse. That just means like, like a benediction is a good word. A malediction is a bad word. It's just like, he just said like, meh. Or it was a judgment, not like a this only happened because I said so, which his answer later makes it seem like it only happened because he said, anyways. So he curses it. He says, may you never bear fruit again at all. And I think that if you care about the tree, maybe you're sad at this point. But what Jesus cares about is you and me. And he would much rather kill a tree so that we can understand what he's saying than to have the tree. And then also, I like to comfort myself with this. If the tree's destiny was to be withered, and I inordinately identify with the tree, there is still comfort to be had, I think. And that is, it is never, it is always a compliment for the Lord to have a job for you to do. It is always a compliment. None of those other fig trees are in the Bible. None of those other fig trees around that fig tree. It's famous, right? Like it fulfilled its tree destiny even better than just blooming. It served the Lord directly. And if I understand, all creation desires to do that. So I don't really think I get to be sad for the tree either way. There you go. Okay. All right. So temple is advertising something it's not doing. The tree is advertising something it's not doing. And when they find the tree later, the gentlemen are not like, oh, the poor tree. Oh, how will people eat? No, the thing that captures them is that because it presents his comment like it's kind of off the cuff, because it says and the disciples heard it. Like, why would it tell me that? Like, if he shouted it or like made a thing or like crossed the trauma, they would have, obviously, you wouldn't have to tell me. I would have known that they heard it based on the story, but it had to say, and they heard him. All right. So we probably went like over here a few feet. May you never. Ugh. And then they heard it. Okay. So walking back, so maybe that's why they're surprised, because at this point he's done walked on water, he's calmed storms, he's fed 5,000 people, he's done some pretty great stuff at this point in front of these dudes. So the only reason I think they're surprised is because it seemed so like casual, like it was just a meh comment, right? And then later they go back like, whoa, to the root, this thing is withered from this morning, insane, check that out. And Jesus's response is not, I'm powerful, not, it was sick anyway. It was, have faith in God. Faith and believe are like, it's like a noun verb. Faith is the noun, believe is the verb. So it's the same idea, right? But so is, as I've said, living out your faith is one thing we separate into two. Like, my brain thinks this, but I'm going to do this, or I think this is the right thing, but this is going to work. And we can fracture ourselves into two things, except for that means we're broken, because those aren't two things. It's supposed to be one thing. So faith, have faith in God. In James, in our study in James, in that first case study, when I said, you must believe and not doubt. Believe, I defined as behave as though it's true. And Jesus says, have faith in God. Truly, I tell you, if you say to this mountain, go throw yourself in the sea, and does not doubt, if someone says that and they do not doubt in their heart, but they believe that what they say will happen, that if they behave as though what they say will happen, it will be done for them. I'm less comfortable with that here in the fig tree issue because it's not tied to something specific. I'm pretty comfortable with it in James because it says wisdom. I ask for wisdom, I'm going to get wisdom. Deal. Got it. Agreed. I can't prove it or disprove it one way or the other. And neither can you, so you can't call me out. But you can call me out and I tell a mountain to jump into the sea and it don't do that. So there has to be a piece of wisdom about this that helps me to use it, that helps me to understand it. So what is that? Have faith in God, Jesus answered. So believe that God can, wants to, and will do whatever he says he's going to do. So at both of the temple cleansings, he he does heavily hint about who he is. In the first one, it's a slightly more of a hint, I think, when he can whips chain, and then they're like, "Hey, bro, who are you to do all this?" And that's when he does the temple thing. He's like, "I'm gonna destroy this and rebuild it in 3 days. That's who I am." And they don't, and they're like, "Wait, it took like 40 years. What are you talking?" They miss it. But it says, but later when he rose, they remembered what he said and they thought, oh, epic, right? But at the time, I was like, don't get it. And this temple cleansing, I don't. It he's maybe less. If it doesn't, the Bible doesn't say he was angry. It did say he used whips. So it seems like a natural assumption that he's irritated. I don't think that I do think it's an assumption though. It doesn't say it. I do think you can fix a problem without being actively angry. You go, this is wrong. I'm going to fix it. Get out of here. Me, here nor there. And this one, it also doesn't characterize him as angry. It just says he entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. Okay. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts, apparently, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. That line only in Mark, not in the other version. And their guess is that a side issue was that this space was just so disrespected at this point that they were allowing a cut through, like from this street to that street, just cutting through because it was faster. So not only were you doing temple marketplace business, but just randoms, just in and out. That's what the study Bible said about that one line, which speaks to they advertised something and then they didn't do it. They did something completely different. Okay, but he does that. And then it says, and as he taught them. So I guess at this point, he like clears some people out, gets this, he cuts off the through traffic, and then the people are gathered around to listen to him, and he's teaching them. That didn't seem to happen with the whips. That was slightly more chaos. And then just the leaders were like, who are you? And, but now the people are gathered and they're listening to him. And as that's happening, and as he taught, he said, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. So he calls it my house. It's pretty epic. And then the children are off in the corner, I guess, singing or whatever. Where does it say that? The chief priests and teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. Doesn't, where is that? It says that here, right? I'm not crazy. It doesn't. In Matthew, it does. So in this one, okay. So in Matthew's version of this temple cleansing, he says that the children are dancing and singing and saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. And that guy is the Messiah. And the priests and stuff come over and go, do you hear what they're saying? And he goes, yeah. And is totally fine with it. That's a pretty direct shot call. Okay. So if both of the temple things tell us who he is and what you give him a microphone.
Before we go very much further, I think the tossing the mountain into the sea is also an important part of this whole story about the temple, the nations of the world being able to come to God and find him, the leaders, the religious establishment saying, you have no part or partial in this place, basically. And this mountain, which is often identified with the mountain of God there in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount, this is all, I think, connected. One of the things he's saying is that right now it doesn't look like this temple can ever be useful for anything, just like the fig tree. But if we have faith and trust the Lord, all things can happen,
right?
Including the mountain coming to God instead of God going to the mountain.
Right. Yes, I agree. And that's kind of, so it says have faith in God. And my definition, so believe means behave as though. Behave as though what? Whatever God that he can, wants to, and will do what? Well, whatever he says he's going to do. What did he say he was going to do in the temple when he cleansed it both times? First time, he said it a little bit more directly. I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to rebuild it in 3 days. And then the second time, he allows himself to be called the Messiah and calls it his house. So at this point, they should know who he is. He's not being shy on purpose about it. And the person he is, what does he say? What does God say the Messiah is going, wants to, can, and will do? Save us. Redeem us. So when I hear have faith in God, truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go, it's the faith, the thing that we're behaving as though it's true is that God saved us. Maybe. Have faith in God. For what? Why? At this point. Pre-Messiah, that's what we were waiting on. For his daily provision, of course, for his to love us, of course, but for him to make us a people, for him to fulfill the promise to Abraham. So one of the commenters kept saying that the fig tree story is a story about judgment. In that the fig tree is Israel. It has, or the temple, Israel. God has said, this is what you will be. I have spoken on your behalf about what you are to do. And then Israel, when you come to it, to the temple, you found it was not that. They had not done it, right? They weren't doing that. They weren't providing the link to salvation that the temple was meant to. So Jesus is going to do it himself. He's going to tear that temple down and rebuild the only one we actually need in 3 days. And his actions, or his declaration, his choice, and his actions are going to line up beautifully. And when that happens, he can do anything, but so can we. But just like freedom isn't free to choose anything with no consequences, it's free to do what the Lord says. I think that if anyone says, example, mountain, now the mountain is an appropriate example for this lesson. Like what you said, it's got this metaphorical purpose, but he must be saying, right? If you say in prayer, if you say with the Lord's authority for anything to happen and you believe it's gonna happen, it will. But there seems to be like a pre-step there, right? You have to know the Lord. You have to have faith in him. He gets to decide who he is. You've gone to his temple where his words are, and he teaches you. And from that, from what God says he will do, if we say it and believe it'll happen, then it happens. I guess. All I know at the end of the day at this story is what I knew in James, that what you say and what you do need to be the same. That if you tell the world, I'm a Christian, and if you come to me and you look at my life and you hear my words, I will show you of the Lord. And then someone comes to your life and looks at your actions and hears your words and they do not see the Lord, you get what the fig tree got. Not because he's mean, but because fruit on a tree is evidence of healthy roots, healthy connection to the appropriate truth. And it's just like with the pruning, if you're not connected to the vine, I'll cut you off and throw you in the fire. Well, this. We already knew that. It's this. That's what's happening. He is teaching us the truth that we have to bear fruit, not because he's a mean harvester guy who wants to make lots of money off of our slavery, but because fruit is just evidence of being correctly connected to the vine. It's like those tests and like the two types of trials. There's one trial where you're like, oh, I don't want to do this, it's suffering. Then there's another one where you can use it to test. Am I right? Do I need to correct? Can I go this way? Can I go that way? And that's what our good works seems to be in James. They're not do these so you get saved, so you can prove to the Lord that you're saved. Other way around. The Lord has saved you. When you do these things, you're proving to yourself that you're saved and to everybody else. Exactly. That's how we prove the delights of his love. And like last night at the Deeper, we talked about trust and obey. It says we never can prove the delights of his love until all on the altar we lay. And I think that has something to do with that. So there's obviously a little more. I was telling Danny, I was like, man, I didn't have like 3 months to study this class. They're going to totally feel the difference between James and this lesson, but that's fine. You guys get it, right? And so just the last. Yeah, exactly. There's a reason James sounds a lot like Jesus, if that's his brother. Even if not, though, I assume James is pretty familiar with the teaching. If he wasn't his biological brother, he was here in the city and he's familiar with. He might have been there. It doesn't say. I don't know. But anyway, and then last thought I had on just the whole faith works thing. So the temple's doing it. The temple has said something, and it must do that thing for it to be holy, because someone holy always their intellectual understanding of reality and their behaved out understanding always match, always, always. When you're holy, and that is true of the Lord. In the beginning, during creation, it's kind of like they take these roles already. God speaks, he sets the goal, he has the intellectual understanding, and Jesus, the word, makes it. And he always makes it match. Never would God speak a thing Jesus won't make, and never would Jesus make a thing God didn't speak, because that's who they have decided to be to each other. And we were made in that image. We were made to be things that intellectual understanding, behaved out, are the same. More, our intellectual understanding, this is supposed to be defined the same way it was for Jesus. God. He is the one who decides our intellectual understanding of things. He is the truth. He is the way. And all holy lives will behave that truth out. And fruit will be evidence of that. And so will lack of fruit. Use that for yourself, and sparingly and lovingly and carefully for everyone else. Questions, comments, concerns, challenges?
I was just thinking of fig tree. Mm-hmm. Like, do you think it could be a symbol of compassion? Like Jesus showed the people in the temple that they are worth beating and driving out to try to change their hearts and minds for spreading falseness under God, versus the fig tree, who there's no changing the fig tree's mind. It's just spreading a false gospel, so he withers it, showing compassion for the humans in the temple, for the Jews in the temple.
Yes.
That they had value.
Yes. That leads me to, we don't have much time. The next idea I'm toying with about holiness is that it does not compromise. What does that mean? It means what he said. It means it is actually compassion to hold the line. It means that if I make something and it is good and beautiful and it's for you, and then someone comes along and challenges or whatever, and they're like, well, I'll only let you give it to them if you put dirt on it. God won't do that. Holiness will not do that. No, he will protect and preserve the good he made. He will not let it cheapen or lessen. He will protect it. He will hold the line. Even if that means hard things for you. Just like my mom. I was way more afraid of her than anything else, especially like if you had to go get shots at the doctor. I didn't know. You hear stories, oh, they'd have to hold me down. Precious. How cute. Your mom wasn't as scary as mine. Because if even for 1 second I gave a nurse a problem about that shot, she was going to make sure I felt so much more than that shot. You know what I mean? Because I needed to behave this way. And I think holiness does that. Compassion does that. If something hard needs to be done to save you, it does it every time, all the time. Holiness does not negotiate. And that's why God seems angry and jealous, because he will not negotiate. Now, he will fight for you and he will do everything he can, besides cheapen what he has for you. That he will not do. Yeah, praise God indeed. Oh, yes. Okay, great. Anybody else? Weird? Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.